At the 2020 Game Awards, Disco Elysium: The Final Cut was announced, an update to the game that would add new content and full voice acting. Up until the update, the game was mostly unvoiced. Pretty much every character had a voice, with the dialogue that you can't really avoid being acted out, but much of the branching dialogue was silent. In addition, the descriptions of scenes and the discussions you have in your own mind were not voice acted at all. When the full voice acting was announced, they said that it was for
every single one of the city's beautiful people,
leaving me to assume that every character would now be fully voiced, but the internal dialogue would still be text only. However, upon playing the final cut, I was shocked to discover that not only is the internal dialogue all voice acted, the descriptions are as well, something I didn't even consider as an option.
In his eyes, an unfamiliar longing, flecks of brown and gold. It's hard to say. His gaze wanders southwest, down the street that goes beyond the horizon.
The sheer amount of text that is now voiced is genuinely astounding, especially considering that the game is developed by a small Estonian company. Disco Elysium is a game about talking and thinking. Pretty much all of the gameplay is based on interaction through the dialogue system. A game like this being fully voiced is the complete ideal solution that only became feasible due to its success and the passion of the devs. However, there's something that remains unvoiced: the dialogue choices.
Have you ever tried your hand at graffiti-o?
The main character does indeed have a voice that can be heard when you sing karaoke, or scream karaoke if you fail the check.
None of this matters!
Voicing the dialogue choices is significantly easier than voicing every internal thought and description. Him staying silent was an intentional choice. And that choice is what we're going to be looking at here today, because it is not just Disco Elysium that considered it. The debate of voiced versus unvoiced protagonists has existed for quite some time, and it's not something that will be resolved by a video from a YouTuber with less than 100 subscribers. But I can at least explore the pros and cons of each side and mention the aspects that many people don't really consider. So, let's get a graphic set up, and run through some of the biggest and some of the less considered points that are in the favor of unvoiced or voiced protagonists. Starting off, a massive point in favor of voiced protagonists is that they're more cinematic. And while adding black bars to preserve Zack Snyder's vision is a dumb way to make a game more like cinema, voice acting is a good way to do it.
Admiral, you jeopardized your mission and your people. Get the hell off my ship.
Also, unvoiced protagonists can sometimes bring down the energy and dampen the impact of intense scenes. Also, it's definitely more immersive when the player character is voiced. Even if unvoiced characters can turn it on when it matters most, it's without a doubt more immersive to have it consistent. And immersion is something that's very hard to qualify, but I think many people will agree that having somebody who speaks without a sound is just more likely to take you out of it than somebody who blends right in with the scene. Of course, this is only true if the voice actor is good. A bad voice actor pulls you out of the game much faster than a silent protagonist. If the voice actor for the protagonist is bad, it can really drag down the entire game. One poorly voiced character is usually just annoying, but if the one you're playing as is dreadful to listen to, then the entire game suffers, because not only are you stuck listening to that voice, it is not fun to know that that is your voice. I think everyone will agree that no voice acting is preferable to bad voice acting, so that is a point in favor of unvoiced protagonists. Another point in favor of unvoiced protagonists is that it really does let the player picture things how they like. It can let them project more onto the character and have them feel a bit more like they're their own. This is especially good in roleplay heavy games. With the voice, sometimes it can feel like the character has a bit too much of a mind of their own, and the player's reins on the character can slip. This benefit still exists even when the character does have a canon voice, like in the aforementioned Disco Elysium. And another thing to think about, how do you convey to players what dialogue option they're picking? With silent protagonists, it's simple, you just have the full lines for them to choose from. But it's tougher with voiced characters. Do you type out the whole thing? If you do that, then it's kind of redundant to then hear the dialogue you just read spoken. Do you do a summary? Then it can be very difficult to know what you're about to say. And that goes double if the summary is just something like aggressive or sarcastic. I personally prefer the Deus Ex system, where it gives you a summary and the full text if you hover over it. Unvoiced characters are also a bit tougher to make interesting. A somewhat boring character can be carried by a good enough voice actor,
Sir, finishing this fight.
but when they're unvoiced, it falls entirely to the writers. And sadly, despite there being genuinely masterfully written games, the writing of video games on average is not great. Many writers are not able to convey a strong personality merely through text. Now, this next point is one that I feel people never talk about, but in certain circumstances, it could be the greatest benefit of an unvoiced protagonist: modding. Massive story-heavy mods for New Vegas and Skyrim are actually rather common, and a huge part of that is that you can put the player character into the mod without changing them at all. Coding in the dialogue options is all it takes, and that makes the mod and the main game blend together much better. The voice acting for Fallout 4 hurt the mod scene quite a bit. Most story mods will reuse and splice voice lines or just have the player character suddenly silent. Both of these are just very awkward.
Any, problems with how we do things?
I hate raiders. I kill them every chance I get.
Thought so. But hey, that's not a deal breaker.
However, many games aren't going to have massive story mods the way Fallout and Skyrim do, so this point only affects games that have modding scenes like they do. What's the one thing a AAA company cares about besides revenue? Cost. Not giving the main character a voice actor will always be cheaper than hiring one, unless you've got some quality tax evasion and embezzlement going on. This means that writers don't have to worry as much when designing new dialogue trees and giving more options. They can make redundant dialogue choices all they like, giving the players some more flavor and control, because they aren't paying for every new syllable they let the player pick from. It also means they're free to punch up the dialogue for the player all they like without having to take into account scheduling and paying the voice actor. If they think of a better way to word an option that won't impact the voice dialogue, they can make the change at 3 AM from their home computer without a problem. Many games with silent protagonists will still give them a voice in some manner. Joker calls his personas. Tequila Sunset sings the karaoke. The Dragonborn shouts. That's because all of these parts just can't work without some voice. The combat in Persona would lose energy if the protagonist was silent while the other shouted. The karaoke would just lose all impact without the delivery. And just imagine how underwhelming shouting would be if it was silent. Some things just need a voice, and the fact that silent protagonists will use voices for these sections is both a benefit and a negative. The fact that they can generally switch between voice sections and unvoiced dialogue without issue is a point in their favor, but the fact that certain parts are practically objectively better with a voice is a point for voiced characters. Looking at all of these, which is better? Well, looking at the points, it seems like unvoiced protagonists are better. But they're not really, because it's completely subjective which of these points matters most to you. The way voiced characters are more cinematic and immersive matters much more to some people than others. People who don't mod don't care that a voice actor hinders it. Some people prefer being able to imagine a voice they like over any voice actor, no matter how good. It really is a subjective matter with no right answer. The hope I had making this video was not to convince anyone which is best, but to help people who feel very strongly about it see the other side more. Or maybe I pissed everyone off, who knows. Thank you for watching, everyone. Goodbye.